5 close friends, Adrian, Marcus, Leon, Victor, and Julian, sat together one late evening, discussing what to do with their free time. They had always enjoyed challenges, especially the kind that no one else dared to try. That night, Adrian brought up the idea of exploring the mountains of Ghazan. The name itself carried fear, for the villagers often whispered about the cursed peaks where people disappeared without a trace. The friends listened closely as Marcus repeated one of the local tales: strange lights in the trees, voices calling your name in the dark, and footsteps that followed, but never showed a face. Victor laughed and said those were only silly ghost stories. Julian agreed, saying that such myths existed everywhere, but no one had ever proved them real. Leon, however, felt a chill when the story was told, though he said nothing. Instead of being frightened, the group became even more curious. They wanted to uncover the truth for themselves. Maybe they would find caves, lost paths, or even hidden treasures. To them, it sounded like the perfect adventure. They promised to stay together no matter what, no matter how dark or frightening the mountains became. They prepared quickly. Marcus took charge of food and water. Julian packed ropes, blankets, and other supplies. Leon carried a strong torch with spare batteries. Victor brought a compass, and Adrian, the most daring of them all, carried a notebook to write about everything they would see. They joked that one day people would read about their journey. Before leaving, an old villager warned them in a shaky voice, "Do not go there. The mountains of Ghazan take the living and keep their souls forever." The 5 friends exchanged glances, then laughed nervously. They thought the man was only trying to scare them. With light steps and high spirits, they set out. As the sun vanished and the peaks turned black against the sky, the cursed mountains waited for them in silence. Their adventure had begun. The 5 friends started their climb into the mountains of Ghazan with strong energy and laughter. At first, the path seemed easy, a wide trail with rocks and tall pine trees on both sides. The cool air felt fresh, and they enjoyed the sound of crunching leaves under their boots. Adrian walked in front, leading with confidence, while Marcus studied the map to make sure they were going the right way. As they went higher, the sky turned cloudy and the air grew colder. The cheerful voices of the friends slowly faded into silence. Julian, who carried the ropes and supplies, noticed a strange mist rising from the ground. It was not normal mountain fog. It was thick and moved as if alive, curling around their legs. Leon felt uneasy and whispered that something was wrong, but Victor quickly laughed, saying it was just the weather. The forest grew darker even though it was still afternoon. The trees stood so close together that very little sunlight touched the ground. Every step forward seemed to pull them deeper into an endless maze. Adrian tried to keep everyone's spirits up, but even he could not ignore the strange silence of the forest. No birds sang, no insects buzzed, not even the sound of wind passed through the branches. It was as if the mountains were holding their breath, watching them. Suddenly, Marcus stopped and pointed to the trees. He thought he saw movement, like a shadow slipping behind a trunk. The others looked, but there was nothing there. They laughed nervously and decided to continue, yet their steps grew slower. As night began to fall, the mist thickened, and the path became hard to see. The friends realized they had gone much farther than expected. Still, they decided to camp for the night, unaware that something in the mountains was already aware of their presence and waiting. By the time night fully arrived, the friends had built a small camp near a large rock at the base of a cliff. They gathered dry wood and started a fire to keep warm. The orange flames pushed back the mist, but only for a short distance. Beyond the light, the forest stood in complete darkness, as if hiding secrets. Adrian tried to cheer everyone up, telling funny stories, while Victor cooked a little food they had carried. Marcus kept checking the map, though he admitted the trail they followed didn't seem to match anymore. Leon sat quietly, staring into the shadows, his unease growing stronger. Julian, holding the ropes and supplies close, decided to set the tents quickly before the fog grew thicker. As they sat around the fire, a sudden gust of cold wind swept through the trees. The flames flickered wildly, and for a brief moment, the friends heard something strange. It was like whispers carried by the wind, soft, but clear enough to make their skin crawl. Each of them froze, listening. The voices seemed to come from everywhere at once, but when the wind stopped, the forest returned to silence. "I heard it," Leon said firmly, his voice shaking. Someone was speaking. Victor laughed nervously and said it was only the sound of the wind, but even he avoided looking into the trees. Then Adrian's face turned pale. He had seen something move, a dark figure slipping quickly between the trunks, too fast for the human eye. Marcus stood up, shining his flashlight, but there was nothing. The forest looked empty. Uneasy, the group pulled their sleeping bags closer to the fire. No one admitted how scared they felt, but each of them kept glancing at the trees, waiting. That night, under the cursed mountain's heavy silence, the first signs of horror had appeared. Something unseen was near them, and it was not going to leave. The night passed with very little sleep. Strange noises echoed from the forest, cracking branches, faint footsteps, and the soft murmur of whispers that none of them could explain. Each friend tried to stay awake, but exhaustion slowly pulled them into restless sleep. When morning came, the camp was filled with an uneasy silence. Julian was the first to open his eyes, stretching as he stepped outside his tent. He froze in shock. One of the sleeping bags was empty. Leon, who had been the most uneasy the night before, was gone. "Adrian!" Julian shouted, waking the others. Panic spread quickly as they searched the camp. Leon's backpack was still there, his flashlight too. The only thing missing was him. Marcus noticed something strange near the edge of the camp, footprints leading away into the fog. They looked like Leon's boots at first, but after a few steps, the prints changed. The shape was not human anymore. The marks grew longer, almost claw-like, and then suddenly vanished into the mist. Victor tried to calm everyone down, suggesting that Leon had wandered off in the early morning and got lost. But Adrian shook his head. He wouldn't leave without his bag. And those prints, they're not right. The group shouted Leon's name, their voices echoing through the valley, but no answer came back. Only the sound of their own fear filled the air. The forest remained unnaturally still, as if listening to them. Marcus wanted to follow the strange trail, but Julian argued that it was too dangerous. After a long debate, they decided to stay together and search carefully, but deep down, each of them knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. Leon hadn't simply wandered away. Something had taken him. And whatever it was still out there, waiting for its next victim. The friends, shaken by Leon's disappearance, pushed deeper into the mountains, hoping to find some sign of him. Hours passed, and the fog only grew heavier, clinging to their skin like damp cloth. Marcus tried to keep track of the map, but every turn looked the same. The mountains twisted into endless paths, and they realized they were lost. As they wandered, Julian spotted something unusual. Carved into the side of a cliff was the mouth of a cave. Black and jagged, it seemed to swallow the light around it. Strange symbols, scratched into the stone, surrounded the entrance, marks that looked ancient and unnatural. Adrian stepped closer, running his hand over the carvings. They were deep and sharp, as if made by claws rather than tools. Victor tried to joke, saying maybe Leon had gone inside. But his voice trembled, betraying his fear. Despite their hesitation, the group decided to enter, hoping it might give them shelter or clues about their missing friend. Inside, the air was thick and cold. Their flashlights flickered against damp stone walls covered with handprints, hundreds of them, smeared in dark stains that looked too much like dried blood. Piles of bones lay scattered across the ground, some broken, some burned. Old, torn clothes hung from the rocks, and among them Marcus recognized something horrifying, a piece of Leon's jacket. Julian dropped his flashlight in shock. The beam rolled across the cave, revealing more symbols painted in red, circling the chamber like warnings. In the silence, the group heard it again, the sound of breathing. Slow, heavy, and not belonging to any of them. They spun around, flashlights trembling, but the sound came from everywhere at once. Shadows moved across the walls, though no figure was there. Adrian whispered, "We need to get out, now." But as they turned toward the exit, the cave seemed darker, as if something unseen was blocking their way. The cursed cave had awakened, and it wasn't about to let them leave easily. After escaping the cursed cave, the friends stumbled through the forest, their nerves broken. Leon was gone, and now the cave's horrors haunted their minds. They tried to find the trail back, but the mist grew so thick it felt like walls closing in around them. Their flashlights barely cut through the darkness, and every step seemed to echo as though the mountains themselves were listening. By nightfall, they were too exhausted to continue. They built another small camp, though none of them felt safe. The fire burned weakly, the flames bending unnaturally as if pushed by invisible hands. Victor tried to stay strong, but his hands shook as he held his torch. Marcus whispered that they should never have come here. Adrian tried to give hope, but his own voice was weak, his eyes filled with fear. Then it began. A low sound drifted through the fog, a voice, whispering Leon's name. At first, they thought it was their imagination, but then they all heard it clearly. It wasn't just one voice. It was many layered together, rising and falling like a chant. Julian screamed when something cold brushed against his shoulder. He turned and saw nothing, but the mist moved as if shaped by hands. Suddenly, Victor was pulled backward into the fog, his scream tearing through the night before it was cut off. The fire flickered violently and went out, leaving them in near darkness. Adrian grabbed Marcus and Julian, urging them to run, but the mist twisted around their legs, pulling them down. Figures began to appear, shadows with hollow eyes, forming from the fog itself. They reached out with long, claw-like fingers, dragging Marcus into the dark. His flashlight hit the ground, rolling in circles before going out. Now only Adrian and Julian remained. They ran blindly through the forest, the whispers chasing them, cold breath brushing their necks. But deep inside, they knew the truth. The mountains had already chosen their fate. Days passed, and the 5 friends never returned to the village. At first, people thought they had lost their way in the high peaks and would eventually come back. But when a week went by with no sign of them, worry spread through the town. A small group of villagers gathered their courage to search. They climbed into the cursed mountains, careful not to wander too far. After hours of searching, they found the friends' campsite near the large rock. The fire pit was cold, and torn tents flapped weakly in the wind. One of the sleeping bags still lay there, ripped open as though someone had been dragged out of it. Not far from the camp, they found scattered belongings, a broken flashlight, a notebook with Adrian's handwriting, and Julian's rope bag. But there were no bodies, no signs of where the young men had gone. The only clear marks were strange footprints in the soil, prints that began like human shoes, but ended in claw-shaped impressions. They led into the mist and vanished. Terrified, the villagers refused to go deeper. They returned and told the others what they had seen. From that day, no one dared enter the mountains again. Parents warned their children never to go near, and travelers were turned away with stern warnings. Yet the legend grew stronger. At night, people living near the mountains claimed they could hear voices carried by the wind, sometimes crying for help, sometimes laughing cruelly. Some swore they saw 5 shadows moving together at the tree line, their figures blurred by mist. The names of Adrian, Marcus, Leon, Victor and Julian became part of the cursed tale. It was said their souls were trapped in the mountains forever, wandering restlessly, searching for others to join them. The mountains of Ghazan waited in silence, patient and eternal. And the legend lived on, warning all who dared to enter. Once you step into the mist, you will never return. If you enjoyed this horror story, make sure to watch my other scary tales. Each one is darker and more terrifying than the last. Subscribe now and turn on the bell icon so you never miss a nightmare.